Good morning, everyone. Hello, hello. Great to see you all. Great to see you. Thank you so much for being here for our final day of Prepare. Again, my name is Brandon with the Office of Global Learning. I asked yesterday and I'll ask again, who's liking all this rain? All right. You know, I find it calming. But probably it can be done for today. So it looks like it's going to be, which is exciting news. I really appreciate everyone being able to make it out here for our final couple of sessions. I'll talk through our schedule now for just a moment so you know what's coming up for this morning and then for the afternoon. What we'll do right now, we're going to have a session with our Dean of Students. As you see, that's up on the screen already, so I'll introduce them in just a moment. Then we're going to have some time to break out with our mentor groups. And so I'll be able to indicate at that time how we're going to divide people up, just so you have one more chance to check in with everyone, see how things are going. After that, we're going to give people time to make the walk over to North Campus, because today we are going to Taganic, the Taganic Park. And so that's where we'll have a barbecue. Hopefully the weather, it looks like things are going to clear up, so you have a chance to walk around. There's a really big waterfall that you should be able to go take a look at, you know, hang out by the lake. You know, we'll kind of see in terms of weather, you know, exactly how things are working. But we have the green light as of right now to go and do that. So we'll be, you know, getting on buses, and you'll be going over to Taganic for a couple of hours just to spend some time outside of the Ithaca campus. You know, there's so much to do around Ithaca and, you know, outside of Ithaca that we really want to make sure that you have a chance just to see some of that early on in your experience here. So once that's over and people come back on the buses, that will be the end of Prepare, and you are then folding right into regular on-campus, you know, kind of orientation like we talked about yesterday. Students are already moving in today. And yeah, we were just talking about how great it is that almost all of you were able to move in advance and not have to move in weather like this. So that's very exciting. But yeah, then, you know, after Prepare, then, you know, you're going to be with each other. You'll be with all the other students that are arriving to campus, and you've already received all the different kind of information about what, you know, campus orientation and all the programming that's going on. So I'll go through some of this again before we get up and people walk back to North Campus to get on the buses. But just wanted to give you a heads up of what the morning and early afternoon are going to look like. Any questions right now that people have on anything for this morning and early afternoon? Okay, great. Well, if anything comes up, you know, Dick Shing is in the back room again. I'll be between here and in the back. Anything that you need, just let me know, and I'm happy to help out with that. So I would now like to begin our first session. I'm really excited about this one. This is a new session for Prepare, and we thought that it was just really important to make sure that all of you are aware of, you know, this amazing set of campus resources. So I'm very happy to present Janet Shorto, who is Associate Dean of Students for Care and Crisis Services, and Nancy Martinson, Associate Dean of Students, Director of the Asian and Asian American Center. Pay close attention, lots of great information. And Janet, I will pass the mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Without the computer, just
You can do that, or you can.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, there it is. Okay, good morning. like you're new to our campus, and many of us are who have been here for a long time are transitioning back to campus. So in a way, we're all experiencing a newness together. So, so thank you so much for being here this morning on this rainy day. I know I was talking with a few of you beforehand as I was walking through campus with my umbrella like this, hoping that I wasn't going to connect with someone on the other side of my umbrella. So good for all of you to get here, and hopefully in the course of our time together, you'll dry off and then the rain will clear and you'll have a wonderful day. So I wondered, just to start, if we would just get a sense of who's in the room. How many of you here are studying in the US for the first time? Wow, so good number of you. So thank you. How many of you have actually been in the US studying before coming here, or have spent time in the United States before getting here? So look around the room, those of you who said you're here for the first time. Your resource that would be really key is actually turning to some of your peers. It looked like it was a good half and half of folks. So it's really important to remember that if you have been in the US before, you already have a set of resources and the way you're thinking about things. Turn to peers that you know are here for the first time and try to remember the kind of questions you had when you arrived. Cornell has a lot of specific things that we need to be thinking about, but generally speaking, you are going to be great resources to each other. This is just a fun one, but when we think about the domestic populations of Cornell, how many of you, as international students, speak more than 2 languages? That's amazing. That's amazing. So I looked at our statistics right now. Only about 20% of Americans converse in more than 2 languages. So kind of just taking a moment of thinking of the cultural enrichment that you're bringing to our domestic population that doesn't have that background or that facility. And we know language isn't just about speaking in a language, but language involves access to a culture that's distinct to that language. And so I just want to start this presentation to say a warm welcome of Cornell has always benefited from international students coming from across the globe and all of what you bring with those experiences. So as much as you feel new to us, please remind yourself, especially on days that might be a little hard, that we are so grateful to have you in our midst. Hey, Ithaca, New York is beautiful year-round. Maybe that was a little hard. I know we only had 2 hands that went up that liked the rain. But with that rain, very soon you will see a gorgeous fall. A lot of the trees in this region turn beautiful colors in the fall, and it really is a spectacular location. Having said that, knowing that we're coming from different climates. Okay. Now it's not advancing.
I got you.
Okay, thanks. So this is what Cornell will look like in the fall, and this is what it begins to look like in the winter. How many of you here have heard or thought about winter and you're thinking, that's not really a lot of what I've experienced before coming to Cornell? A lot, right? So as much as we think about preparing for, and I know Prepare also speaks of this, is that much like we would prepare for today of getting our umbrellas and getting ready for this weather, part of the way of living in a climate that has winter and you're walking along these beautiful paths, but it can be quite chilly and icy, is to begin to think about, okay, what do I need to have in place so that I don't just endure winter, but that I'll be able to embrace it, enjoy the benefits of it, but also to feel like I'm ready. And I know from talking with international students over the many years I've been at Cornell, sometimes the domestic students kind of scare people who haven't had winter, like, oh, you haven't experienced our winter. I can tell you that winter is all about preparation. There are so many ways to prepare. It's not about necessarily bulking up. It's about having the right layers, and that you really can, with talking with people, getting online, have the resources so that it doesn't feel like a hardship, but it's just one more experience of being here. So my colleague Nancy, who is wearing the signature footwear that many of us wear here in the fall, that is available. Waterproof boots are a great asset to your attire. They come in multiple colors, and you can get them at almost any store here in Ithaca.
Thanks, Janet. Hello, everyone. My name is Nancy Martinson. Again, I am an Associate Dean of Students and Director of the Asian and Asian American Center. And this is what we're going to talk about today in this presentation. I'm going to go over quickly just some culture shocks, share a couple idioms and some American customs, which may be new to some of you all. And then I'm going to talk about living in an American context. And so for those of you who this is your first time, some of this might be shocking. So we want to prepare you and we want to make sure that you understand what's happening in our nation and how it may relate to you. And then we're going to talk about mental wellness as well. All right, so culture shock. When I was in a master's program, one of my classmates who was from China, she was about to give a presentation and another classmate was like, "Oh, are you feeling ready or do you have cold feet?" And she was like, "No, my feet are not cold." Like, what a peculiar question. But really what he was saying, he was asking her if she was nervous about presenting. So I'm going to share a couple idioms and let's see if you know what they are. All right, so turn to a partner sitting next to you. What does it mean to cut somebody some slack? So go ahead and chat it up with yourselves. All right, so I'm going to bring you to the front. To cut somebody some slack means don't be so critical. So if I'm talking to someone and they're like, and I'm being really hard on them, like, "Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this?" Someone might be like, "Hey, Nancy, cut them some slack. They tried their best." And so they're just asking me not to be so critical. All right, how about this one? Pull someone's leg. What does that mean? Turn to a buddy. What does that mean? All right, so bringing it back to the front. To pull someone's leg means to joke with someone. So if I'm playing around and they'll be like, "Nancy," or I could tell you, like, "I'm just pulling your leg. I'm just kidding. I'm just pulling your leg." That's what it means, is that I'm joking around. All right, two more. A penny for your thoughts. What does that mean? Yeah. I know, I don't think I know this. This one's a hard one. I'll do the next one. All right, so a penny for your thoughts. Tell me what you're thinking. So it has nothing to do with money. It's tell me what you're thinking. So I'm like, "Hey, you know what? I'm thinking about changing my major. I don't know, between this or this. A penny for your thoughts? What do you think? What do you think? Should I change my major?" That's how you would use that expression. All right, last one. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You know what that means. All right, so what does this mean? You can't force someone to make the right decision. So I can be like, "Hey, Janet, I need you to make an appointment with Caps. Let me show you the website. Let me show you where to click. Let me show you what information." But then Janet doesn't do it, then I would use this expression, right? "Well, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make him drink. I did everything I could to help this person, but it's ultimately up to them." All right. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some customs. So small talk is common in the US, as is being friendly to people you don't know. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be kind of weird if you're not used to it. So I feel like, are we small talking right now? Look at this, an example of small talk. So an example of small talk, we'll normally use it when we're forced in like tight quarters. So if you're in an elevator, we may not be quiet during an elevator. We might participate in small talk. So I know the past president of the International Student Union, I asked her what is something that she will not miss. And she mentioned talking about weather. She just could not understand why Americans talk about it so much. So we'll be like, hey, how do you feel about this weather? Or, is it raining outside? And she's like, aren't you outside too? Like, don't you understand how cold or how hot or how rainy it is? But this is something that we tend to do a lot. Or we'll talk about sports. We're pretty big into sports. So we'll be like, oh, did you catch that game? It's just a conversation starter for us to get to know people a little more. Also, we have a bad habit of oversharing. So some of us come from cultures where we're very private. We keep things to ourselves. Here in America, we can be very open. So maybe we're classmates and we're working on a project, and I just got off the phone and I'm like, oh, that's my stepmom. My dad cheated on my real mom with her. I hate her. I hate her stepchildren. I'm so glad I'm here at Cornell, right? This is actually something that might be said, and you're just like, whoa, why would you tell that to me? We're not friends. That's such an odd thing to say. We also overshare with food. So honestly, we could be like, hey, last night I went to Taco Bell. I had a bean and cheese burrito, and oh my gosh, I had like diarrhea for 3 hours. And so I only had a couple hours of sleep. And like, again, you might be like, why the heck would you share that? Why would you say that? So just heads up, we have a bad habit of oversharing. So just something to prepare yourself for. Tipping, this can be some, oh, it's not, okay. It sounds like some of you have experienced tipping. So in America, oftentimes we really don't pay our wait staff enough money. And so their salary actually depends on us tipping. And so when you eat at a sit-down restaurant, it's pretty customary to tip between 15 to 20%. But tipping is something that we do here in America. Also, something that can be surprising to students is when you go to a store and you buy something and it says it's $9.99. But when you go and pay for it, it's $11.12. And you're like, wait, what just happened? So there's tipping, and we also have sales tax. We have a tax on a lot of our items. So just something to be aware of. Food portions. How many of you have been surprised by how much food we serve at a restaurant? All right, a couple of you. So just know, typically when we serve food, we serve a lot of food. And there's actually something called the freshman 15. The freshman 15 is this idea that in your first year of college, because you're not at home eating the food that you're used to, or because you're not as active as you may have been in your hometown, when you come here, you gain 15 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilograms. That's another thing. We talk in pounds. And so I think for international students, if you are not used to our portions and you eat our portions the way we serve it to you, you may find that your parents, when they see you next, are like, whoa, what happened? So just something to be mindful of. And then hookup culture. So some cultures are really surprised about how quickly relationships can move here in the US. And again, how open we are about conversation. So there was a program that the International Student Union and HILC, which is the Holland International Living Center, we put together an event where we talked about domestic and international just dating norms and just even like going on a date. So if a student after class might be like, oh, hey, let's go have lunch. You might think, hey, it's lunchtime. That's logical. Let's go eat lunch. But then they were actually asking you on a date, but it wasn't very clear. So there's some dating norms to be aware of, but over communicate. Make sure you're talking about just, I'm eating lunch, or just make sure to share what it is that you're thinking or feeling or how you're engaging with a conversation. All right, so next I'm going to move into something that's a little more serious. I was just trying to warm you up with those other things. And that's about the American context in which we're living in. So you all are arriving in the US at a time of significant emphasis and struggle around issues of identity, of history, and empowerment. This segment is to really kind of just give you a background on some of these topics. Again, our goal here is to ground you in what's happening in this nation, so you aren't surprised when you read something in the news or you hear conversations in your classroom. And so these are a couple of things that we're specifically going to focus on. And actually, I'll talk about that later. So the first thing is I just want to acknowledge that we are in a global pandemic. So everyone is experiencing the pandemic, but the US is experiencing, depending on where you live, differently. And so something that's important to recognize is it may be really surprising or perplexing to you to recognize that there are US citizens who have access to the vaccination but refuse to take it. They don't want it. They believe that it is their individual right, their civil liberty to say no to having a vaccine or even to wearing a mask. And so this is something that I just want to acknowledge. I want to put out there that this is something that's happening in our nation. There are Americans in our country who feel that the pandemic is a hoax, that it's not real, that it's fake news. And so this is also something that I want to just kind of bring some light to. However, Cornell is not one of those places. So Cornell is committed in accordance with scientific research to protect the health and safety of our campus and surrounding communities. And in fact, 96% of on-campus staff, students, and faculty are vaccinated, are fully vaccinated. So it is something here that we take very seriously. But yeah.
So if we are like vaccinated with a non-FDA approved vaccine, but it's WHO approved, can we get like a third shot for a Pfizer or
Yeah, no, great question. So he had a question about the vaccination. And yeah, there are certain vaccinations that we are looking at that are FDA or WHO approved. And if you don't have that, then there is access to another vaccine if you wanted to get it. And on the website of the Office of Global Learning, they actually have like a FAQ page that can really kind of highlight in detail what those steps would be, what the rules are, and how you would move forward if you wanted to get one of our vaccinations. Great question. But also just kind of wanted to recognize how this pandemic may be impacting visas, it may be impacting the ability to travel. And also something that I found last year with students who were here during the pandemic is a sense of guilt. So here at Cornell, like I mentioned, 96% of our on-campus community is fully vaccinated. And so we are taking it very seriously. And there was guilt that, man, I'm here in this country and I'm safe. I have access to regular testing. I'm surrounded by people who are taking this pandemic seriously. And back home, my family isn't living in those same circumstances. And so there was understandably just some feelings of guilt that you're here safe and sound, whereas your family might be at home struggling. And so I just want to just say that out loud and acknowledge that that might be something you're feeling during your academic year here. Inclusivity. Here in America, we're really big about gender inclusivity. And so, for example, I don't know if you've seen it already, but when we introduce ourselves, we might say, hi, my name is Nancy. I use the pronoun she, her, hers. And that's just part of my introduction. Or I might just say, hi, Nancy, she, her. I'm the director of the Asian American Center. So just know that that tends to be ingrained in our introductions. It's optional. If you don't feel comfortable saying them, you don't have to. If you want to practice saying them, you can. And it's honestly, we say pronouns as a way to be inclusive to those who don't identify as either female or male. And so maybe non-binary or non-gender conforming. So they don't identify as one or the other. And so it's also common for people to just use the pronoun they. And they is actually a singular pronoun. It doesn't mean those people, they can be me. So like Nancy went to the store and they bought some eggs and cheese. So that's also something that's common, is if you're not sure, we'll just use the pronoun they. And I also want to just acknowledge that this idea of using pronouns is very English focused. There are literally some languages that don't have language for a non-conforming or a binary person. So for example, I'm Filipino. And I can say I'm Filipina, or if I want to be more inclusive, I can say I'm Filipinx. So it's a way of just kind of acknowledging that not everyone identifies as male or female. All right, getting heavier, race. So race is a social construct, but Americans are obsessed with race. It's very important for us to understand where you belong, how you belong, what box can I put you in? So when someone meets me, I'm half white and half Filipina, but when they look at me, they're like Asian. She belongs in the Asian box. And unfortunately, that's something that our country just tends to do. And so this is a breakdown nationwide of what the race makeup of our country is. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because our obsession with race may impact your identity formation during your time here. So if you are from China, where the majority of people there are Chinese, you may not think about race because the majority of the people there are Asian. Why would you think about that? But living here in the US, we're going to throw it in your face. We want to make sure that you know that's what you are. And again, just something for you to just be aware of and prepare yourself for. I know I worked with a couple of students who were from India, and they had shared with me when they came here, everyone was all like, oh, you're Asian. And they're like, what am I? Like, I don't consider myself Asian, but okay. Or they'll be like, you're brown. And they're like, why are you calling me brown? Like, what a peculiar identity that you're assigning me. For those who are from Middle East, where does that go in this box? Oftentimes people might say, well, if I'm from the Middle East, I'm white. That's the race that makes the most sense. However, you may not be treated as a white person. So that's also why it's obvious that race is a social construct. It's something that we made up to place people in boxes. And with that, I'm going to move over to Black Lives Matter, also known as BLM. And I'm just going to read the mission statement to you. So the BLM mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on Black communities by the state and vigilantes. And so people may have heard of BLM before, but it became really evident global wide when George Floyd was murdered by a police officer. And so this is the mission for Black Lives Matter. The main focus of this campaign is to really bring attention to police brutality here in the United States, and to recognize how Black people are treated here in the United States. And so there's an expression, there's Black Lives Matter. Some of you may have heard the term all lives matter. Something that I really want to make clear is when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying other lives don't matter. We're just trying to recognize that here in this country, the Black community has been marginalized intentionally, historically, systematically. And so we are actively, as a country, bringing attention to this cause so we can make it right, so we can be better. And so I really want to just acknowledge that this is something that you might hear in conversations, you might see stickers or signs. There has been a BLM organizing on campus, and President Pollock did put out a statement to just kind of recognize and acknowledge and support Black students here at Cornell. There are clubs and organizations that focus on activism and supporting the Black community. And one of the more well-known clubs is a club called Cornell for Black Lives. Anti-Asian racism. So around the world, Asians served as a scapegoat for COVID, which resulted in an increase in anti-Asian racism and violence. Something that happened last year was in March. This year, March of 2021, last academic year. There was an incident where a white man shot and killed 8 people, 6 of which were Asian women. And as a result of that, specifically, Asian women were hyper aware of how they're sexually fetishized. And so that was something, an identity that they didn't really necessarily think about, but became in the forefront of their mind in regard to dating. Are you dating me because you like me? Are you dating me because you have an Asian fetish? The model minority myth is an American myth in that just simply by being Asian, you're automatically smart. Like you don't even have to try, you're just smart. And it's truly a belief that people don't say out loud, but they have. And so that can be a real challenge for Asian students who are struggling in class, who didn't get a good grade on their prelim, which is what we call our exams. And so I just want to acknowledge that this is a myth and that it is a-okay for Asian students to seek out help, and they should if they need it. Cornell hosted a teach-in to acknowledge anti-Asian racism and how as a campus we could do better to support students, and those conversations will continue to be had this year. And I know as the director of the Asian American Center, I had people reach out to me and they're like, is it safe? Like, are we okay there? Are people going to be mean to us? And honestly, there have not been any increased reports of bias of students saying those things. However, there is a hypersensitivity right now of being Asian. And so if you're right now, as you're wearing a mask, if you start coughing, someone might look at you and you might think, oh, dang, are they looking at me because I'm Asian and I'm coughing? Are they assuming that I have COVID? And that's real. So I have that fear too. And so I just want to acknowledge that this is something that you are probably going to carry throughout your academic year or until COVID ends. And so I want to bring that to your attention as well. And I just want you to know that I'm a resource. And so I'm here to support students. And the kicker is, you actually don't have to be Asian to reach out to me. I'm here to support all students. So if anything in this presentation, you related to it, or you have more questions and you want to talk to me about it, I'm happy to be that resource for every single one of you who are here. All right, that was super heavy. So what are we going to do about all of it?
I know the room got very, very quiet. All of these topics could take hours and hours to digest and to fully understand what does that mean in the context for me as an international student. Our intent today was just to touch in, just to give you something of a marker, but there are many, many opportunities at Cornell to explore all of these and you know, what does that mean to me as an international student? So I hope that was helpful just as a marker. When these terms are highly politicized and you're outside of the culture that just assumes you know what they mean, it's important to have a little bit of a guide to, okay, at least I have a sense of what that might mean for me. So in the area of mental wellness, I want to go back to the notion of when we were talking about getting ready for winter or Nancy's lovely autumn rain gear. Oftentimes when we get to school, the notion is, well, what does it mean to plan proactively for my own mental wellness, my own sense of feeling okay and capable here, both in my physical health. And we're going to talk just a little bit about mental health. So oftentimes when I hear the word stress, what's the association you have when you say, oh, I feel a lot of stress? Is it a positive thing? Is it like, what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear stress? Just shout out a word. What'd you say? School, yeah. So I think when I hear stress, it's immediately, I think of it as something like, oh, I'm so stressed out. What I hope you can look at this is, and any of you, how many of you have trained as runners or athletics of any sort? How many of you have been? So you know that the body, yeah, so good. We have, you're going to get a lot of good physical exercise here. And this is a good part of staying well while in school. When you think about what an athlete, you have to actually stress your body to get to maximum performance, right? There's an element when you start planning for a 5K, it doesn't feel very good. Recognizing that that's a natural transition of, oh, I'm in a new environment. I'm going to be studying things that I haven't studied before. I might begin to feel a little stress. And so to look at this chart and say, okay, so I assume that that's part of the experience. I want to feel a little stressed, to feel stimulated and to be able to respond. I like this chart because it's sort of, I have to be self-aware of, well, where is that balance? You know, Healthy tension is I'm feeling really engaged, I'm feeling involved, maybe I'm feeling a little nervous, but I'm in the game, if you will. When that tips, when I'm feeling like I got sick or I feel fatigued or I feel a little overwhelmed, you start to see where that stress can work against you. Easier said than done. But cultivating at the very beginning of your academic life here that you're going to be checking in with yourself and others about, where am I in relation to the stress I'm experiencing? That stress in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. So I like this chart. I don't know if you can just take a moment to look at it. It gives you a little bit of a roadmap of checking in with yourself about where am I in my mood? Where am I in my work level? Where am I ability to hear and take feedback from others? How am I focusing? Am I communicating effectively? How's my sleep? One of the things that informs this chart is all of us come to this moment, and Nancy's presentation before would highlight there's social factors that are outside of our individual lives, our own personal histories. How was your travel here? What were your experiences of all leaving home? What were all the feelings associated with leaving home and leaving family and the natural support systems that you grew up with? The feeling of being in a culture where the weather's going to be different, the culture's going to be different. So already you're kind of having to take an assessment. Okay, let me think about my internal world, about where my stress level is that's informed by my personal history. There's a term called allostatic load, is a kind of self-awareness is when do all of these combined factors tip the balance where I feel like, I might be in need of some resources. And so as you look at this continuum, we rarely go from one day being, I'm on top of my game, to the next day in full crisis. We can have moments that are of crisis, but typically, if we're really tuning into our lives, we can see some gradual shifts that might be a signal, I think I might be needing to tap into a resource. One of the most important protective things that we can do in our lives to stay well and grounded is to eagerly seek out social connectedness. So much of Prepare is about helping you to feel a sense of connection with others here, some of whom share your experiences. You at least have all that commonality of being in the country as international students, but also to connect you to our larger community. My sense from students of being here many years is that sometimes you come in and you're at risk for sucking yourself out. Like, I'm not going to join anything. I'm going to get focused on my academics. I'm going to have my room set up. My family has worked hard for me to be here. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not going to get involved in things that are going to keep me outside of my academic focus. Can you see that as a possible tendency? Like, I don't know what's going to be expected of me. I'm just going to focus and get in gear. What we know from the growing research and why Prepare works so hard to have you feel that sense of connection is we don't operate in a vacuum. We're social beings. We need to feel a sense of belonging. We need to feel a sense of where we connect. We need to know where we go when things feel a little hard. And oftentimes developing those relationships with peers is the first layer of support. I've met so many students over the years that still reflect back on the friends they made in Prepare. And the ones who remember that are the ones who said, I am going to make a commitment to stay connected to people that I met in this program because we're going to go through so many changes together. And this is going to be an important way for me to stay connected with people who can really reflect back to me and see me, especially when I might be feeling less resourceful. I'm going to turn to the mentors that are here. So as mentors to this program, what was the primary reason that you wanted to be mentors in this program for the new students? What motivated you to want to be mentors?
I just wanted to talk to people and get to know people from different countries. I think it's always a good experience to do that. So that's why it's happening.
So the idea that you wanted to, and you also, I know we were talking earlier, some of the mentors have been here they were not here for one semester, or they were here one semester before the pandemic. So we're bringing a lot of different experiences. But I know when I went to school as a first generation college student, I went with that mindset. I am just going to be on the straight and narrow. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm just going to do my studies. And I can tell you, the capacity to be resilient and actually a good scholar relies on you actually investing in that part of your life as much as your academic life. So that was just, so if you saw yourself on this chart, say, you're a few weeks in, it's been a little hard getting used to, and fill in the blank, and you start to see that you have some of these like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling like I'm not as focused, or I'm having a hard time sleeping, or boy, the activities that I used to love before I got here are not here. Sometimes stress shows up in the body that we don't necessarily register as a sign of emotional distress. So stomach aches, headaches, low energy, depression can often feel like I just feel like I can't move. The more we can be open to talking about that, first of all, for ourselves, with others, we can start to register, I might be in this place, I'm doing okay, but this might be a time where I think, okay, what would be a place or a person that I could turn to that would help me to think about what I might adjust or tweak in my life to make this a little easier. So where to turn to when you actually do feel like, yeah, I'm not just struggling a bit, I'm really feeling a sense of deep distress. And there's so many reasons why we might feel distress that are because of the context of which we're studying. Over 20% of students here at Cornell seek the counseling center for a myriad of reasons. There is a 24/7 access for consultation and support. So for some folks sitting here, when I went to college, I had never had a reference point for mental health. I think my reference point was, well, that's, I don't know, like you have to be falling apart, or you, I really feel a little badly now that I thought of mental illness as you're crazy, when mental illness is a much more complex notion that affects a lot of people. And there are many, many people who live and succeed here at Cornell that also live with a mental illness. There's been a lot of good advocacy over years to help us to understand that better. But I wouldn't have thought that I would have a resource that I turned to because I was dealing with homesickness or culture shock, or just feeling like I'm not feeling really connected to my peers, or there's so many things here that just feel so different, or something as simple as I haven't been able to eat anything in the last few weeks that reminds me of home or makes me feel good. Or maybe even I don't know, I can't even say it's one thing, it's a lot of things. And that is often the times when that list of, it's usually not one thing, like I didn't do really well on my first exam, my roommate and I are not really close, I really miss my family. We try to connect on Skype, but it's or FaceTime or probably so many, WhatsApp, but they weren't able to be there. We're on different time zones, so it's really hard to talk to my family. You start to add those up, any one of those things, we all have the capacity to cope. But back to that notion of an allostatic load but sometimes the balance of it can tip. And to really honor the whole of your life here, we're really inviting you to take seriously what's happening inside of your heart and your body, to be able to say, I might need help. It's been a hard thing, particularly in the Cornell culture. You are premier students from across the globe, and you join premier students in the States. You've worked really hard to get here. Oftentimes, identifying that you need a little help well, that feels like I'm failing. That feels like I'm not doing as well as everybody else. There can be a lot of self-judgment. I thought it was really important for you to see that 20% of our students seek counseling support every year at Cornell. And there are many more students that seek support from the myriad of places on campus where there is support. Nancy mentioned the Asian American Center. There are centers across this campus that are here specifically to foster a sense of community and connection, and also a chance for you to thrive and grow in ways beyond your academics. We want you to graduate from Cornell as leaders, as capable interpersonal communicators, as people who feel a sense of zest and joy for life, and for you to tap all of what's important in all aspects of your life. So how will you be connected? Before the rush of classes, we wanted to give you an opportunity, and you guys were talking so fast before about the idioms. I want you to turn to someone around you and say, think of something that gave you pleasure before you got here, something that kind of just really important to you to stay connected and to feel grounded and to feel, happy to be alive and glad to be here on this earth. Or something that you thought, oh, I heard Cornell, I might be able to do this. Just turn to someone. I want you to name one thing that you are willing to commit in your life that is about your wellness and your comfort of being here part of a community. So just take 1 minute and say one thing that you want to commit that will be about the care of your own being while you're here. I am so glad to hear this conversation. Oh, it's so great to hear the enthusiasm and passion. So friends, if you can come back to this discussion for just a brief moment. Okay, you can't see me smiling, but I'm smiling, you thinking, this is what I hope you will take some time at the barbecue today, is to be planning for your spiritual, mental, emotional wellness, that you take it as seriously as everything you'll bring to your academic life here. And that maybe you'll even jot down goals for yourself about what you're going to take advantage of. There will be many other resources that will be spoken to you at every moment of your life here at Cornell, but I want you to know there's lots of resources around time management, about learning skills or how I might maximize my ability to study and to perform well. Cornell is highly resourced for all of what you might need to help you to not just survive, but to thrive here. And a resource that I hope you'll remember, from within the main Cornell website, there is a page that's caringcommunity.cornell.edu. If you forget the website, just put into the browser Cornell Caring Community. It's an entire page of every resource you might imagine. I think sometimes turning to a resource like do a little research, look and see, well, what would that might be? What I hope you'll remember is that Nancy and I are here, are part of a broader team within the Dean of Students. It's great to know a resource, but it's also really important to know people you can call to say, I don't know, this is what I think might be helpful to me. You can reach out to all of our offices, and we're very easy to find within the Cornell website. So, my friends, you may not know, I hope you do, but I'm glad to be able to tell you that international students have been at Cornell from the very, very beginning, when this institution was formed in 1865. This is a picture from 1904, the Cornell Cosmopolitan Club, formed by an international student while here at Cornell. The theme of this club that went right into the 1950s, and many other cultural clubs were available then and many more since then, that greatly enriched the collective experience at Cornell. What I love about this club and the history of Cornell is that it was an international student who recognized that as we come from every parts of the globe to study here, we get to know each other. We get to talk with each other across different cultures. We get to really know and appreciate something of the connections we might share, even given the cultural differences. So the club was formed with the aim that you would leave here having had this experience and be ambassadors of peace and goodwill throughout the globe. I love that that's a part of our history. And I can, of course, say that it is the presence of international students that's made that vision of global community a reality for all of our students, our domestic students, with your presence. And so on behalf of the Dean of Students, I want to extend again a warm welcome and thank you for choosing Cornell and choosing knowing how much it must have involved in your life and your family's life to make it possible to be here. I hope you will continue to feel our warm welcome, that you are truly, truly an important part of our community. And to remember with that in mind that we really are here to support you so that you thrive and have as best an experience to get everything that you hoped you would get here at Cornell. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Hi, everybody.
I turned it off, sorry.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah. Hello? Okay. Hey, everybody. Round of applause again for Nancy and Janet. Thank you. So we do have time right now if people have questions. I know that the presentation went through a lot of different things, a lot that you'll want to spend some time thinking about. We'll also have a time to break out in just a few minutes in our kind of mentor groups. You can also, have some time to process, talk about things. But any questions for Janet and Nancy before we let them go? No? Okay. No, definitely understandable. Well, we'll be making the presentation available to everyone, so you have their contact information. My office, the Office of Global Learning, does so much with the different Dean of Students units. You'll see much more of them throughout your time here. So do please take advantage of that resource, and we'll find ways to get that resource in front of you throughout your time at Cornell. So thank you both very much. So give me just a second, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our recording because we are not done.